SharePoint has always been great at storing files, but many organizations have scanned PDFs of documents, contracts, invoices, or maybe even have them as images. And don't get me wrong, SharePoint can store them, but because they're not searchable, you lose a ton of value because not only people cannot search them, but also AI tools such as Copilot are not going to be able to return them. But what if I tell you that with just a few clicks, you can fix all that? In this video, I'm joined by Microsoft MVP Drew Madelung, which will help us deep dive into enabling Optical Character Recognition, or OCR, in SharePoint. Drew, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Vlad, for having me. And today I'm going to go into OCR, talking all about OCR inside of Microsoft 365. My name is Drew Madelung, and I'm glad to be able to talk about this today. What we're going to be going through is first an intro to what is OCR in Microsoft 365. We're talking about where does it work inside of the platform as a whole. How do you estimate your costs, which is one of the main things we need to understand, is this is a consumption-based scenario. And some tips that I've seen in working with OCR that you need to understand as you move into enabling and working with OCR inside of your organization.
And for those of you that have been following the series, this is the 8th episode in the series. And of course, if you're just got here as the first video and I'm sure you'll enjoy it, make sure you check out the other episodes in the series. And of course, we'll have a link to the playlist in the description below.
The first thing we're going to start talking about is what is OCR and how does it work? So Optical Character Recognition is a service built into Microsoft 365. You might have thought that it was always been there, but it hasn't been. So you could be uploading your files or images today, and you might be thinking they're going to be indexed, that they would be available for you in things like Copilot, but they're not in the way that you would expect. So now with OCR inside of SharePoint and M365, it allows you to actually extract printed and handwritten text from the images and documents and files that you have inside of SharePoint. And what actually happens is that if, let's say, I upload a file, the actual text or the handwritten text is extracted from that information and then indexed in Search, which then makes it findable inside of your platform. That indexed data is not just available Search. One of the best things that you get part of this is that that's how you enable advanced Purview features that use OCR. So if I'm sending an email that, let's say, has a receipt that has PII in it or proprietary information, and you have policy set up that would allow you to detect that sensitive information, when you enable OCR, the Purview features now can be enlightened by that information to allow you to find that information in your DLP policies to help protect your organization more. What happens when this is set up is there's actually going to be a new metadata column added to the areas in the site that you have that have OCR enabled. And there's actually a column called the extracted text column. So you can actually visually see what is happening as part of OCR. Now, other files that you might see actually don't use that information or don't actually use that column, but they are still indexed as part of the Purview functionality. One of the concerns you might have is we have a ton of files. We might have millions of files and is duplication. So if I upload the same receipt 10 times, you're not going to be charged from an OCR perspective for all of that, as there's native deduplication as part of the OCR service to check to make sure there's only unique images that are there, so you don't have repeated scans and cost as you're working through this.
I think just from a Purview point of view, it can be so important for organizations, because if you don't have that enabled, then it ends up that you ended up not giving the right information or not retaining the right information. That can have a huge financial impact. So it's a must.
And what I'm seeing the most is people don't know that it doesn't exist. That by enabling this, it's a level understanding, it's a base understanding of what's possible and what they expected to happen. And then if they didn't ever run any DLP tests or policy validation, they wouldn't know that it's not working. And so you do need to set this up, and I'll go through how to set it up in both locations. So it's not just a single setup to empower you for every scenario. Also, this is available in over 150 languages. So it will be able to extract text, not just in English, but also multiple languages that you need depending on the area you're in. So it's not a language issue that we would see in potentially other content AI solutions that we have today. So let's take a look at what OCR looks like. So I'm going to come into SharePoint Online, and I'm going to have a site called Content Processing Operations. And you can see I have a collection of images in here. Some golf courses, some background images, a picture of myself in there, But let's look at this one down here, which has a sign that's that's sitting on a golf course. I'm going to go into a different view here. I'm going to go into a list view. And what you're going to see is these files that are existing in this library have a new field called extracted text and image tags. So these two columns in here are going to actually be text from the image that I uploaded, and it'll extract and put it into a column, and then this column is the same as any other SharePoint column. It's indexed, it's a crawl property, and this is what SharePoint will use and other solutions will use to be able to render and return values in it. So if I take a receipt, let's take a file here. So I'm going to take a receipt here to show you what it looks like. A standard receipt. It's got a bunch of information in it for some breaks. And what's going to happen with this is you're going to see multiple names, receipt totals, descriptions.
And this is an image right now, right?
It's an image. That's a good point. Yeah. So this is I think it's a JPEG. And this JPEG file, it will only take, it does take a little bit of time. So within a few minutes as I say, the first time you could figure this, it might take a little bit longer, but within the set amount of time, it will extract that. And hopefully when this comes back in, actually that was a really fast one, you'll see I have an online receipt, East Repair, the location.
I'm surprised about how fast that was. Like, I thought we were going to have to do some cutting and post-editing to make it happen.
I was ready for a refresh and do it a couple times, but yeah, that was actually a fast one. You'll see it didn't pull out a ton of information in this one. You do not have a control of what is extracted from it. I have seen good success from handwritten though outside of it. The big thing is that it's better than nothing, right? Yeah. Like without that, you wouldn't have any of that information available to you without having this configured. Now, there are some other scenarios. So if let's say I take a document that has a receipt and image inside of it, this one is a little bit different. So what you'll see if I have these files that have images inside of them, though the extracted text column is actually not filled in for this one, but that data is indexed. Okay, so it was still part of OCR still happens on that file, but the way Office documents now render is that they don't use that column. It's just directly injected into the index that Copilot can use and your SharePoint and Microsoft 365 search can use. So don't be worried when you don't see it there. If you run a DLP test or you do an OCR test against that, they just can't see the information through the SharePoint UI today.
And that's something that I know you also, the first time you did it, it was like a bit, I'm waiting for it.
Yeah, and that's what, when you're doing OCR, you don't necessarily know how it's happening, right? Yeah. You enable it, and I'd say that's one of the scary parts of it is what happened when I've enabled this. And the biggest thing is to trust. You can see it. It will happen. You can see it in certain files. You can see it not in certain files. But if you want to run a test, do a standard search for information about that, like what's in that image in Microsoft Search, and it will return that value for more of a keyword-based search, not I wouldn't say necessarily a semantic search in that sense. So going deeper into what's OCR, around OCR, it does have supported file types. That is important. Not every file type will be indexed or supported from OCR, but does hit the core ones that we see, with the big one being PDF. So if you're doing any of the auto scan or scan capture around Content AI that are going to be PDF, you can actually start to stack these solutions on top of each other to get the auto extracted text from OCR and some other Content AI solutions around that. That would be PDF related. The other are going to be your core image ones around PNGs, JPEGs. They are all fully supported. There is a slight difference when you're looking at the Purview workloads around Teams, Exchange, and Windows. So they have a smaller subset that are supported outside of SharePoint and OneDrive, but your core for end user search are going to be in SharePoint and OneDrive, but it does depend where they're located. Those images, again, when you're looking at images and documents, the documents themselves, the images have to be added in, not just embedded. So if you embed an image, those won't be OCR'd. If I embed an image in an email, it won't be indexed or OCR'd. It has to be added into it. So if you go new image, pick it from your device, that's the way it is, not a link to that image.
Okay.
The images do need to be less than 50 megabytes. So I would assume this would be more of a challenge in some of the Purview scenarios where you need larger images to be scanned. So if you don't see that, it will be a size limitation. And there is also a limitation on the pixel size or the just pixel range there. So 16,000 by 16,000 is the max.
That's a lot.
If you're hosting some very large images, that would be a scenario. I'd say the bigger risk is the smaller images. If you have some very, very small ones that you've mapped out, but there are limitations that you need to know about. And the big one here, the last big one here is images are uploaded after OCR are the only images that are scanned.
Okay.
So when I turn this on, it's not going to go out and index every PNG I have in my entire tenant. When I've modified the file or worked with the file, then it will happen.
Is there a way to manually trigger it, to go on it, and then, like with autofill columns, which we've already covered, can I just go and process this?
There's not a way to automatically trigger the OCR processing. It will have to have some type of interaction with the file.
Okay.
So from a searching perspective, that is a little bit of a challenge. From a Purview perspective, less of a risk because it will still happen everything in transit, right? So if I'm going to be doing sending an email or working with a file, potentially sharing it externally, right? That's an action that happens, which then would trigger the OCR as it would be an action on the file. So the slider, to be more aware, like files that are sitting at rest and you want to, let's say, run a search for it, it won't happen. But over time, the big thing is turn it on now. Yeah. And the longer you have, the more files you work with, it will continue to index the files as they're modified.
And before we cover the most important part after is how to turn it on. I know you said images must be less than 50 megs, but documents can be over it.
Documents can be over that size as long as the image inside the document is less than 50 megs.
Each image on, like say I have a PDF document with 10 pages. Each page is an image technically. Each one of those images need to be less than 50.
The PDF itself, for PDFs, it would be the PDF has to be less than 50.
Okay, good.
If you're looking at an Word document, which is an XML-based formula setup, then the images inside would be less.
Okay, perfect.
Now, coming into cost, right? How do you set this up? You think about images, we think about how this is going to work. So we do, the first thing you can do is there is an OCR estimator. The OCR estimator is in preview today, and you can't run it actually once OCR has been enabled. So what you can do is you actually have to go into Purview to run the OCR estimator. You don't do this setup in the Microsoft Admin Center or in the SharePoint Admin Center. You actually go into Purview, you go into the settings in Purview, and you click OCR. And if you're there for the first time, you'll see a try for free action in there, and it will let you run a scan in your organization to see what the estimated OCR cost would be based on a set amount of time. And you can run that and download that report. So I can take that report and look at the latest scan data I have, and then I could run another report if I wanted to check the dashboard, or we'll reset the dashboard once I've ran it again, and you can check the locations you want to scan. So I can pick Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and your devices, as long as you've enrolled your devices from a Purview perspective. It will provide an estimate for you to at least give you a gut check of what the usage would be for having OCR enabled.
Awesome.
Now, setting this up, this is set up as part of the Microsoft 365 pay-as-you-go services. The unique part about OCR for this setup is that you are able to pick the specific SharePoint and OneDrive sites that you want OCR to be enabled. So if you want to validate this, or you're worried about cost, and you have a lot of stale data, you don't need to set this up for your entire tenant. You can pick specific SharePoint sites that are important to you or that have potentially risky data that you want to have OCR on, and you can filter that based on CSV. So I can take a CSV, upload it, and manage that through a file. There's no dynamic way to do that. You have to maintain it yourself. But if you do want to control cost or pilot this out, you can enable it, but then focus it down to a subset of sites. You cannot do a subset of like Teams and email, right? So you can have very SharePoint specific locations, and then the rest is going to be enabled.
Awesome. And for those of you that haven't watched this series in order, if ever you want to learn how to enable pay-as-you-go services, so how to go link it up to the Azure subscription, best practices and all of that, we have a fully dedicated video on that. The link will be in the description below, so we won't cover it in this video, but if you want to do it, you'll have the full video that covers just that topic.
Now, the last thing to think about here is around how to set up OCR inside of Purview. So let's say I've ran that setup, I've done the estimator in Purview, I've gone in and set up pay-as-you-go. You then still need to go into Purview to configure the Purview OCR setup. Okay, so just setting up OCR as part of the pay-as-you-go services and picking your SharePoint sites does not enable Purview with OCR. You have to go into Purview, go into the same area where you've set up the estimator, and then you will pick the locations that you want OCR to be enabled with as part of Purview. your existing Purview policies will then inherit that OCR update. So you don't need to go back into your DLP policies and configure them. They will naturally inherit the configuration that you've set up as part of the settings inside of Purview. This sensitive information types and trainable classifiers you have also inherit that information. So if I have a custom sensitive information type for, let's say, social security numbers that I've built, it will naturally use the OCR configuration based on that sensitive information type.
Okay, so just if I recap, I just want to make sure I understand. So we have a bit of a SharePoint-only experience and a Purview experience. If I just want it to be tagged in SharePoint for Copilot Search, I don't need to do anything in Purview as a SharePoint admin. But I would get more value if I do it in both, because then my compliance also gets more out of it, right?
The comparison is interesting because you end up with two different teams usually that want to use this. I've actually seen people driving it from the Purview perspective, and then the SharePoint admins naturally get that information. But you do need to set them up, or else you're not going to get any of the Purview functionality without having the compliance team there.
Okay.
The cost for that is going to be around $1 per every 1,000 items. So each page of a PDF is an item, each image is an item, but each image is only scanned once. So from a cost perspective, if I have 1,000 unique images, it's going to be $1. So you're looking at a very cheap, very low cost in that. But when you're looking at scale of large organizations, it could be obviously a very, very large amount of images when you look at the scale that we have today, and it's going to continue to grow. But overall, it is not highly cost intensive, but definitely run the estimator depending on the size of your organization to see what that cost will be. And it's good to know that those teams and devices that I have, so if I've set up OCR, it will not do, from a Purview perspective, it won't do DLM and RM, which is data lifecycle management, my retention policies, and my records management labels. So if I wanted to have files on my device that have an image and I want to automatically add a record or a retention label based on some type of sensitive information type, it won't be able to go down to the image, but that will work in SharePoint and OneDrive. The tips that you need to know about that: if you do want to work in any more advanced searching around OCR, the internal name of that extracted text column is actually called the media service OCR value. So if you're working with, let's say, the PnP search web part or your own search solutions, you will need to map that to a refinable string to make that available to you in your own applications. That's what's not called extracted text. You can add that extracted text to your document library views. So once you've enabled OCR on that library, if you go to it today before enabling OCR, it won't be there. Once you've enabled OCR, give it some time, you can go in there and show and hide columns, and the extracted text column will then show up for you. The incoming and outgoing email are subject to OCR. So again, it's not just outgoing, it's also incoming. So if I have policies around DLP or IRM that would affect incoming email, that will also be inherited as part of the OCR setup. The DLP policy tips in Exchange, though, don't support OCR. So if I say, I have an image that has sensitive information in it, I put that in an email, policy tips would be, you might expect a policy tip to show up to say this contains sensitive information. It won't happen in the client side or in the website. It will happen in transit, not while it's just sitting at rest inside your email. The endpoint devices, what's important for this is that it does send that information. OCR does not happen locally on your machine. The OCR happens up in the cloud. So those images do send to the cloud for scanning as part of your setup. So if you're looking if you have concerns around your network traffic, that is something to be aware of, that once you've onboarded your devices, those images will be sent up to the cloud for scanning. And as you get into the world of communication compliance, it is different. So if when you're looking at Copilot and you've set up communication compliance to find, let's say, hateful prompts in there, or people upload images into Viva Engage, that has its own OCR model.
Okay.
So they built, there's a separate world for that. It manages itself. So when you set up OCR is already happening for that today, and you don't know about it, this OCR will happen. The OCR here for Content AI is its own machine on the side. And the last one here does require pay-as-you-go. So as we said, please refer back to our other video in the series around how to set that up, and you'll be able to see the details for how to manage the billing and understand the impact of that cost.
Awesome. Well, Drew, that was really, I think that covered everything. Thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And for everybody else, if you enjoyed this presentation again, please make sure to check out all the other videos in the series. You'll have a link to the playlist appearing on your screen right about now. And of course, if you want to connect with Drew, you'll have all his LinkedIn and social media profiles in the description below. Drew, thank you so much again for taking part in this video.